Welcome to my dojo. This is Kung Fu Pizza Party, and I'm your host, Brandon Knight. And of course, I could not have ended this year, the year 2024, without acknowledging the fact that it is the 50th anniversary of the most iconic martial art themed song of all time. I speak, of course, of Kung Fu Fighting by Carl Douglas. So let's go ahead and get right into the history and lyrics of this song, because for those of you joining the show for the very first time, here on Kung Fu Pizza Party, I seek to deliver high-flying action in 30 minutes or less and to serve up some wisdom one slice at a time. So we are all thrills, no fills here on the show, so let's get started. The year is 1974, and Carl Douglas, a Jamaican vocalist, is in the studio working on his debut single. He's finished up the A-side, the main single. It is now time to work on the B-side track. And his record producer for this project is British Indian musician Badu, who was a pioneer of disco music. And he didn't really have any ideas for the B-side track. It was the B-side, after all. Who actually listens to the B-side of the record? And since he didn't really have any ideas, and kind of seems like he didn't really care too much about what ended up there on the B-side, they went through Douglas's notes of partial lyrics, songs, ideas, and eventually worked with one of his notes and wrote out the song that would come to be known as Kung Fu Fighting. That's right, folks. Kung Fu Fighting was originally intended to be the B-side track, and wasn't really expected to do well. It wasn't really expected to even be heard that much. Douglas and Badu both didn't really, think much of it. They were just gonna, just had to finish the project. And Badu, in interviews later on, said that because it was the B-side, that, this is why in the song there are so many chopping sounds, kias, all the kind of like goofy background noises, because it was the B-side track. It was just supposed to be kind of this fun filler, a little bit of a treat for those who actually decided to flip the record over and listen to the other track. And to kind of go further on with the whole, they didn't really think too much of this song. They had the studio for 3 hours. And by the time they had finished the first side, the A-side track, and sat down to record the B-side track, they only had 10 minutes of studio time left. They recorded Kung Fu Fighting in 2 takes. There was not a lot of time put into this song that would go on to be an iconic track. Now, like I said, Carl Douglas and Badu both were just like, okay, we need to finish and move on. So they did the song as the B-side, didn't really think much of it. But there was somebody, or I should say some people, who thought differently about the song, and that was the record label, Pi Records. Pi Records went back to Douglas and Badu and requested that be the A-side track. They put a lot of stock into that song. They thought it was going to do something, and who would have thought the record label actually knew what they were talking about? Now, initially, it looked like they didn't, because at first, when the song did come out, it didn't really do anything for the first 5 weeks that after the song was released. 2 things, though, seemed to really contribute to the popularity of the song after that first initial month that it was out. The first was the nightclub scene. The nightclub scene picked up on the song and started playing it, and it got really popular in those kinds of venues. It's even still to this day a song that you just have to dance to, so it makes sense that it would catch on in the nightclub scene. But the other reason it seems like this song really caught on was because this song came out at the cusp of the chopsocky craze here in the United States. That word chopsocky was coined by Variety magazine right around 1973. So this was even like a newer term right around the same time that this song initially came out. And it was a term Variety used and eventually caught on within the vernacular of the rest of film goers to describe the movies that were made in Hong Kong that were finally coming over to the U.S. market. It was all these kung fu movies that, the movies that we think of that have the, over the top action, violence, gore, big stunts, the movies with the kind of silly decisions that were made for sound effects for, punching and kicking and all that. And, the movies that the dubbing, it's not very well done. The voices don't match up very well, or all the voices sound the same. This was the term that was used to describe these kinds of movies. And I did some research into this, and apparently chopsocky is a reference to chop suey. But here with chopsocky, the word chop is supposed to be a reference to karate chopping, and sake is not the drink, because that's Japanese. It's not the drink, but it is, when you punch somebody, that might be described as you sock them in the gut. So that is where chopsocky, how those two words were brought together for this term to describe the kung fu movies coming out of Hong Kong in the 60s and 70s, all the way up until the early 80s, apparently. This was how long this term was being used. Nowadays, it seems that, although from what I read, chopsocky is not necessarily a slur, or I would have avoided saying it here on the show, but it is not necessarily the most appropriate term to use ever. Which is saying something, seeing how, for those of us of a certain age, we may remember that not that long ago in the early 2000s, Cartoon Network had a cartoon called Chopsocky Chooks. So it hasn't even been that long ago that we were using this term still within pop culture. It's not the most appropriate term to use to describe kung fu movies. If this episode's coming out not just before New Year's Eve. So let's say you're going to have some friends over for New Year's Eve and you want to have a movie marathon. Don't tell them you're having a chopsocky marathon. Tell them you're having a kung fu movie marathon. Tell them you're going to watch a bunch of Jackie Chan movies. Don't use chopsocky. It's and I think this really goes to show how here in the United States, we are the masters of the backhanded compliment. Here we are. Here is something from another culture that we're enjoying, that we think is really cool and really good, and we're having fun, and it's becoming part of our pop culture. And how do we describe it? Chopsocky. Not kung fu movie or gong fu movie, which was another thing that was being passed around at that time, or not Asian action film, Hong Kong action film. Chopsocky, we're going to go with that. Another term that I came across when researching chopsocky, and then I promise we'll get back to the song. Another term I came across while researching chopsocky, movies where the hero played a spy character. Those movies, those spy characters were referred to as chow mein spies. Again, we're so good at being so offensive in our compliments. We're just, definitely don't go around using that phrase. Just gonna let you know that one. Anyway, so with the nightclub scene and just our interest in, we'll say, kung fu movies in the early 70s, the song skyrocketed. It became a number one in the UK and in the United States. It earned certified gold. It earned Carl Douglas the Jukebox Award for Soul Song of the Year. By the way, so just so you know, the Jukebox Awards were determined by number of purchases. So it had gotten the most amount of purchases in that category. Question: Does Touch Tunes have a year-end award based off of the number of purchases? Because my guess is Creed and Nickelback are winning all of the awards then, if they do. Anyway, so this song blows up, and eventually in 1975, Carl Douglas's first full-length album, Kung Fu Fighting and Other Great Love Songs, comes out. After that point, Douglas releases 2 more records, but nothing ever quite lives up to the popularity of Kung Fu Fighting, so much so that it has earned Douglas the title of being a one-hit wonder. So much so that in VH1, when they released a 100 greatest one-hit wonders of all time, they actually placed Kung Fu Fighting at number 100, and UK's Channel 4 did a top 10 and top 50 one-hit wonders lists at 2 different points, and in both cases, Kung Fu Fighting came out at number 1. Now, for all of you who are curious and have not seen this VH1 list before, according to VH1, the number one-hit wonder of all time is the Macarena, which... Look, I know in the 90s, the Macarena was like the it thing, but come on. I think it's time that we update this list. Like, the Macarena has not stood the test of time. Here are some of the other ones. Listen to this. I mean, look at this. Come On Eileen is number 3. Mickey by Tony Basil is number 5. Ice Ice Baby by Vanilla Ice. Take On Me by Aha is number 8. That should be number 1. Take on me, take on me. Now, I know you would think that I would say, obviously, the greatest one-hit wonder is, of course, Kung Fu Fighting. But honestly, I really like the Pina Colada song. If you like pina coladas, that's a fun song, y'all. That one's... So should it be the Macarena? I don't know. I don't know if it should be the Macarena still. But obviously, 50 years later, whether it's number 100 or number 1, 50 years later, Kung Fu Fighting is still one of the greatest songs ever. We all know this song. And it has continued to live on through covers as well. In the 90s, Bus Stop did a cover of the song, which, if you don't know who Bus Stop is, think Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. And if you don't know who Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch is, congratulations on being born after Y2K. Then for the first Kung Fu Panda film, CeeLo Green did a cover of the song. And then for the third film, the Vamps did a cover of it. I don't know why nobody was tasked with doing a cover of the song for the second and fourth movie, but just following this trend, if there is a fifth Kung Fu Panda film, my pick, let's give it to Dua Lipa, because Dua Lipa has been working hard to bring disco back. I don't know why, but you know what? She does it really well. And so let's give her one of the most iconic disco songs of all time to cover. I think it could work really well. And that takes us through the brief history of Kung Fu Fighting. Other than, I guess it is worth mentioning, as we will see here in a moment, all of these various covers of the song don't really cover the song. It's really more sampling. The covers do use the music for sure, and the iconic "oh ho ho ho" that Carl Douglas does, and usually features that opening line of "everybody was kung fu fighting." But as we will see here in a moment, because we still have half an episode left to go, we're going to dive into the lyrics now. And you might see how maybe there are parts of this song that just different times. We're just going to go with that. Different times, different people. So we're going to do it. Here we go. We're going to get into the lyrics of Kung Fu Fighting. And like I said, this song opens with Carl Douglas's iconic O's. Then he jumps right into the chorus for this song. Everybody was Kung Fu Fighting, which I know has become quite the meme nowadays. Surely not everybody was kung fu fighting. Or I've seen the one before. It's like a map of the world, and it's all one color. And it says, like, survey done by Carl Douglas in 1974 on how many people were kung fu fighting, implying that it was everyone. Here's my thing. Within the context of this song, I would argue that the everybody here is not everybody on the entire planet, but the scene that he is observing. Those cats were fast as lightning. I'm sure everyone is thrilled to hear a white guy use the word cats that way. In fact, it was a little bit frightening because they fought with expert timing. So Carl Douglas is observing this scene here, and he sees these people doing kung fu, and he's actually taken back by it. They are so fast, and their timing is so good that it's startling. It is frightening. That is how good these people's kung fu are. Now we move to the first verse. There were funky China men from funky Chinatown. Now, I had to pause there between the words China and the word men to help people understand that this is not the racial slur which John Mulaney has referred to as the laziest of all racial slurs, because it's just two words being shoved together. No, so what we have here is funky Chinese men, not Chinese women, but funky Chinese men in funky Chinatown. And I know nobody is thrilled to hear me use the word funky over and over again like that, but I'm gonna be honest here, folks. I kind of want to go to funky Chinatown. I'm just going to say it. Funky Chinatown sounds really cool. I would like to go visit funky Chinatown. I would also like to rock down to Electric Avenue sometime. They were chopping them. They were trapping Bend up. What? The people that I have here for the lyrics did not write these lyrics right. They were chopping them up. They were chopping them down. I bet this is some like AI generated thing that got these lyrics. They were chopping them up. They were chopping them down. Now, I have been reflecting on those lyrics for like a week now. They were chopping them up. They were chopping them down. And I've got to say, I have no idea what that means. Were these guys like seriously just throwing chops at each other? What are they? Gunter from WWE or Walter for all the indie fans out there? Or are they just like chopping at each other? Seriously, who actually chops? Who throws a shoe? Really? Who actually chops in a fight? Like, I've done self-defense drills where I have to like chop before, but in an actual like fight scenario, I don't think I've ever chopped. It's an ancient Chinese art, and everybody knows their part. Everybody knows their part. From a feint into a slip and a kicking from the hip. I really like all of that. It's an ancient Chinese art. Everybody knows their part. From a feint into a slip and a kicking from the hip. He's setting the groundwork here for us. He's helping us understand what is Kung Fu. Well, it's a Chinese art, ancient Chinese art, that everybody knows. Everybody knows their part. Not everybody knows, excuse me. That's not what he's saying. Everybody knows their part. Very synchronized. Everyone is confident in what they're supposed to do. Feinting into a slip, kicking from the hip. We get a little bit of groundwork as to what's going on here. A little bit of history. We're world building. Love that. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Carl Douglas. Moving on now back into the chorus. We'll skip over you all having to hear me say cats again. Second verse. Here we go. There were Funky Billy Chin and Little Sammy Chung. There's no possible way for me to make that better. There's no way to make those names better, although still loving the use of the word funky. He said, I don't know who and Little Sammy, maybe it's Little Sammy Chung, because he's the one right after. He said, here comes the big boss. Let's get it on. So the big boss has arrived. And I guess Sammy Chung, sorry everybody, I guess Sammy Chung is challenging the big boss to a fight. We took a bow and made a stand, started swaying with the hand. Now, all my life, I have had a misheard lyric moment here with the song at this point. You know what I mean by a misheard lyric? You've heard a song 100 times or more, and every time you sing it, you sing that line with the confidence that only Beyonce can have, and only to discover that it's not "Hold Me Closer, Tony Danza," it's "Hold Me Closer, Tiny Dancer." I had this moment with this song. The lyric again is, "We took a bow and made a stand." This whole time I had been singing, "He took a bow and made a stand." So this whole time I have been singing a song about, apparently, Sammy Chung taking a bow. The big boss has arrived, and now Sammy is getting like prepared to go into battle with the big boss. But the line is actually, "We took a bow and made a stand." So this whole time I thought Carl Douglas was just observing funky kung fu fighters in funky Chinatown, and that these cats were like fighting each other, and then the big boss arrives and it's like, oh, it's time to throw down with the big boss. I believe Carl Douglas is the big boss here, folks. Carl Douglas is the big boss, and he is about ready to throw down with, I guess, Sammy Chung. I guess. Anyway, so a sudden motion made me skip. Now we're into a brand new trip. So again, coming back to this reality that these funky kung fu fighters from funky Chinatown, these cats are so fast. They are so fast. Yes, I'm doing this intentionally. They are so fast that it makes Carl Douglas skip. And for skipping, I like to picture he's doing that running backwards move that Bruce Lee and also Shane McMahon does sometimes. When I do it, I look more like Shane McMahon than I do Bruce Lee. But we all have done it before. I think that's what he refers to here as a sudden motion made me skip. Now we're into a brand new trip. We're into a brand new trip here, folks. This is a brand new era. Kung Fu fighting disco. This is the moment we have been waiting for as a culture, as a society. Kung Fu fighting disco music. We go back to the chorus one more time, and then the song kind of fades out with this combination of Kias and different noises, and Carl Douglas repeats throughout the refrain here at the end, keep on, keep on, keep on Kung Fu fighting. And you know what, folks? You know what, Carl? For 50 years now, that's what we've been doing. We have been keeping on Kung Fu fighting, and here's to you, buddy, for another 50 years of your iconic song, Kung Fu fighting. Well, that's it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening, and special shout out to some Joyful Noise listeners for dropping in for today's episode. If you haven't yet already, please consider rating and reviewing this show wherever you get your podcasts. Pass this episode along to your friend who likes disco music. They exist, so send them this song, or send them this episode rather. And if you haven't yet already, also please consider following Kung Fu Pizza Party on Instagram at Kung Fu Pizza Party. It's the best way to know what's going to be coming up on the show, what's going on in each episode, and also to engage in community discussion. I think our community discussion post this week is going to be, what is your favorite one-hit wonder? So I would love to hear what your favorite one-hit wonder is. And if you know of any other martial art themed songs, I can think of one other one, actually. Let me know. Maybe we could do another one of these song deep dives at some point. I'd love to do it again. Thank you all for listening, all you funky cats out there, for joining me on today's episode. This has been Kung Fu Pizza Party, where we delivered high-flying action in 30 minutes or less and served up some wisdom one slice at a time.